Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Welcome to All Things Social Security. I am Stephanie Joy, the attorney at Joy Disability. Welcome to the channel, and I hope you enjoy the video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Stephanie Joy with All Things Social Security and the Law Practice of Joy Disability. Okay, so this is a share. A viewer had asked multiple times and at least a month ago for a discussion on the Social Security ruling 19-2P, which is about obesity and how that is considered in the SSA world. So I think it's a really important one. So I set it aside to be able to take some special time for it. I put together some notes that'll help us better understand what the obesity medical impairment would be, what it would not be, and how we can use it to strengthen our claims. I don't know if this will come out all at once or be in multiple parts, depending on how long it goes. Could go a half hour, not sure. Okay, so when we talk about obesity combined with other impairments, which I alluded to before, the ruling here, 19-2P, specifically says that the combined effects of obesity and other impairments may be greater, and I would say often is, than the effects of each impairment considered separately. Like I said before, you might have a limitation of walking that would be kind of like, because of this arthritic knee, and you can get more technical than that if you want, doesn't matter. I think, he's limited to light amount of walking or light RFC, which means 6 to 8 hours is quite a bit of walking. So that's one thing. But when you add obesity to that, what does that do to the amount of time a person with an extra 100 pounds or 200 pounds can walk on that knee that is already limited to light? So that's what you got to be thinking about, how it would add to by detracting from the capacity. How does it make it worse? Another way to put it would be, for example, obesity combined with arthritis in any weight-bearing joint may cause more pain and functional limitation than the arthritis in that joint would otherwise cause. And it kind of makes sense, right? So it matters a lot in cases, like I mentioned before, with these joints like knees, people with hip problems, back problems, arthritis, sleep apnea is affected by obesity, fatigue, shortness of breath, diabetes, depression, and other things that cause reduced mobility. So where there are many bad decisions that can happen with the SSA, there's things you want to take note because it could be an appealable issue. So if the SSA mentions obesity, for instance, but then fails to explain how it affects those knees that you've already proven are impaired, hips, back, the sleep apnea, fatigue, or ability to stay in work, that could be an appealable issue. So it's really important to look at, for instance, an ALJ hearing decision where there's a denial and obesity is an impairment and even considered potentially a severe impairment, but it's not explained how it affected the otherwise impaired knee. It's a common error, I think. I think we see it a lot when the ALJ says that the obesity was considered, but then doesn't go into the details to explain exactly how it affected the RFC, residual functional capacity. It's not enough for his decision to simply list obesity as an impairment, which they invariably do. That's not something that they seem to miss. It is the follow-up. It is the explanatory duty they have thereafter. So the decision really needs to explain whether the obesity causes limitations and how these limitations were considered, and both alone and in combination with those other impairments that the judge acknowledges exist. Or, of course, if you didn't acknowledge an impairment existed that you know there is ample evidence of. The decision should not just say by the judge, I considered obesity. And they sometimes do that. It's really vague because this particular ruling requires that the SSA explain how it reached its conclusion about whether obesity caused any limitation. So I want to talk to you about what kind of evidence helps prove the functional limits. These would include things like repeated weight and BMI noted in the medical records, diagnosis of obesity, of course, things like the knee pain, the hip pain, the foot pain, the back pain, imaging showing arthritis or degenerative changes, abnormal gait. Do you limp? Do you waddle when you walk? Are you imbalanced? Is it apparent? These are the kind of things you have to make sure you're not hiding from your doctors. Reduced range of motion, use of a cane can be important, or a walker, or use of a brace or any other assistive device. If you have sleep apnea in the evidence, that is very helpful. Fatigue, shortness of breath, those can all be aggravated by obesity. Diabetes, edema, and swelling of extremities or elsewhere. And provider statements, meaning your doctors, making statements about, and this is harder to get, but it's really helpful when they do, statements about your reduced sitting capacity, what happens when he sits too long, standing, walking, lifting, any kind of postural activities that you have difficulties with, or if you need to take breaks from activity, in and about your home. When I say it's harder to find those, it's because we don't seem to see providers talking about functional limitations. They talk about diagnoses and maybe pain levels and things like that, and observations like edema, swelling, but you don't see them talking about those work-related tasks. And I think sometimes the best way to get those in there, and I've said this in other videos, but I'll say it here too. Sometimes it's helpful, I think, before your next visit to message your provider and say, don't be saying, I want to associate this with my obesity, but if you do have problems sitting because of the obesity, or bending, or seeing your feet, or standing hurts any of your joints, and it's aggravated by the extra 100 pounds, it might be something to say, doctor, can we talk about things we might be able to do because my pain on standing for more than a short period, it's getting worse. And you could be that simple about it. You don't want to act like you just researched a book and then send him a message. But getting those things in there might, one, prove that you're complaining about it when he forgets to put your complaints in the record. And two, it might just mean you get to talk to him about it. And of course, this is an aside, them saying, medical recommendation to lose weight. You don't say. I mean, we all know about that. And being unable to lose weight is not going to hurt you. I mean, the SSA people are pretty well recognizing, since half of them are obese too, that it's kind of like flat words. We can be told and told and told, but getting it accomplished is like really, really difficult. So moving on, just to reiterate, our claims of obesity, assuming that's going to win the day, is not going to work. It's going to have all these things in the medical evidence. You want to show, here is how my obesity worsens the other impairments, and here is how that affects work-related functions. And even if you don't say the word work-relating function, you say functioning. For instance, I can't stand and do dishes for more than 4 minutes, or whatever. Whatever it is you're not doing for very long, because then I have to go get on the recliner because of those knees. It's showing that the knees are super bad, and the obesity can be the reason why they're worse than what their own diagnostics might suggest. Their own diagnostics show there's a problem and it would be limited, but maybe not as limited as you need it to be. And the obesity can be the explanatory fill in the gap. So again, just to do a little overall picture here, don't assume obesity is automatically disabling, because it almost never is. SSA will not assume limitations from a BMI alone, so you have to have those weight and those measurements and all that in there. If you discuss it with your doctor, even better. Discuss your symptoms and things that cause you pain, even if you don't connect the dot for him that it's aggravated by the obesity. Normally doctors figure that out and they'll say, if you lost weight, it might help. So you need to do all those things, but when you have the MDI and it's severe, the SSA cannot ignore the obesity. They have to give the details as to how it's going to affect you. So you want to have as much information in that file by communicating with your doctor so it gets in the medical record as to what those functional impacts are. The obesity has to be evaluated by the ALJ or the SSA underlings as part of the full disability picture, especially when it worsens your pain, your fatigue, your mobility, your endurance, sleep apnea, arthritis, or any other impairments. So start taking notes. Start taking notes on the things that you know obesity would generally impact upon. And I've listed probably most of them here, but there are others, and including endocrine and other things, metabolism and all that, cardiac, another one. So anyway, get to it, guys. Pay attention to it. Don't leave it out, and don't not talk about it. You know, back in the old days, we never talked about it. It was something back in my day when I was young, and now, you know, it's easier to talk about, and it's easier to talk to our doctors about. So anyway, I hope that helps. Whoops, do you hear those dogs? Have a great one, guys.